A kid from a village with no running water built a $14 billion drug empire that terrified governments. Joaquin Guzman grew up in a dirt floor shack in the mountains of Sinaloa, selling oranges at age 6 just to eat. 40 years later, he was shipping 500 tons of cocaine into the United States every single year. Not through brute force, but through a logistics operation so sophisticated, the DEA compared it to Amazon. Tunnels with railways, submarines with GPS, a bribery network reaching presidents. But here's the thing about El Chapo. He didn't just outsell his rivals, he out-engineered them. La Tuna, Sinaloa, 1960s. The village had no paved roads, no electricity, no running water. What it had was poverty so deep that children worked the poppy fields before they learned to read. Joaquin Archivaldo Guzman Loera was born into this world in 1957, the eldest of at least 7 children. His father was a cattle rancher. That was the official story. The real business was opium gum, harvested from the poppies that grew in the Sierra Madre Mountains and sold to traffickers who moved it north. By age 6, Chapo was selling oranges on the streets. By 15, he was working the fields himself, learning the family trade from uncles who had been moving product for decades. This wasn't a fall from innocence. It was a graduation. The only path out of La Tuna was paved with poppy resin, and everyone knew it. But here's what made Chapo different. He wasn't just willing to do the work, he was obsessed with doing it better. While other traffickers relied on violence and intimidation, young Joaquin studied the supply chain. He watched how product moved, where it got intercepted, why some loads made it through while others got seized. He was small, which earned him the nickname Chapo, meaning shorty. But what he lacked in stature, he made up for in patience and calculation. His break came in the late 1970s when he caught the attention of Hector Palma and the emerging Guadalajara cartel. The cartel was pioneering a new model, consolidating smaller trafficking operations under one organizational umbrella. Chapo started as a logistics coordinator, essentially a middleman between Colombian suppliers and Mexican distribution networks. It was grunt work, but it taught him everything. He learned that the real bottleneck wasn't supply. Colombia had endless cocaine. The problem was getting it across the border efficiently. And that problem, Chapo realized, was an engineering challenge. So he started digging. The first tunnels were crude. Short passages under the border near Tijuana and Mexicali, barely wide enough for a man to crawl through, but they worked. While other traffickers were losing shipments at checkpoints, Chapo's product vanished underground and reappeared on the other side like magic. By the mid-1980s, he had refined the concept into something extraordinary. Tunnels with reinforced walls, ventilation systems, electric lighting, even rail tracks for moving heavy loads. One tunnel, discovered years later, stretched over a mile, equipped with an elevator on each end. But tunnels were just the beginning. Chapo built an entire logistics empire designed around redundancy and innovation. He used fishing boats modified with hidden compartments. He commissioned submarines, actual submarines, capable of carrying several tons of cocaine beneath the Pacific. He bought commercial jets and flew them into remote airstrips. He bribed trucking companies to hide product in legitimate shipments. When one route got hot, he had 3 alternatives ready. The structure of his organization was equally sophisticated. Chapo ran the Sinaloa cartel like a franchise operation. Regional bosses controlled their own territories and supply chains, but they paid tribute to Chapo and followed his rules. This cellular structure meant that if one cell got busted, the others kept running. No single arrest could collapse the system. And then there was the bribery network. This was Chapo's masterpiece. He didn't just pay off local cops, he built corruption into the operating system of entire institutions. Municipal police, state police, federal police, military commanders, judges, prosecutors, prison guards, politicians at every level. According to testimony from his eventual trial, Chapo allegedly paid $100 million in bribes to a single Mexican president. Whether or not that specific number holds up, the principle was clear. Protection wasn't an expense, it was infrastructure. By the early 1990s, Chapo had secured direct relationships with Colombian suppliers, cutting out intermediaries and dramatically increasing his margins. The Colombians had the cocaine. Chapo had the delivery network. It was a perfect marriage of supply and distribution. The numbers became staggering. At its peak, the Sinaloa cartel was moving an estimated 500 tons of cocaine into the United States annually. Street value in the tens of billions. Forbes put Chapo on their billionaires list in 2009, estimating his net worth at $1 billion. DEA analysts suggested the real figure was closer to $14 billion. But empires attract enemies, and Chapo's rise meant war. The Arellano Felix brothers of Tijuana came first. What started as territorial disputes escalated into open warfare. Shootouts in restaurants, assassinations in broad daylight. The Juarez cartel followed. Then the Zetas, former military special forces turned mercenary, notorious for their brutality. Chapo's response was calculated and merciless. One by one, his rivals fell. Rodolfo Carrillo Fuentes, Arturo Beltran Leyva. Dozens of lieutenants and plaza bosses, the body count climbed into the thousands. Entire towns emptied as civilians fled the crossfire. Mass graves became a feature of the Mexican landscape. He wasn't just winning because he was more violent. He was winning because he was more organized. While his enemies burned through money on private armies, Chapo invested in infrastructure. More tunnels, more bribes, more routes. Violence was a tool, not a strategy. The machine hummed along until 1993. That June, Chapo was captured in Guatemala after a firefight at the airport. He was extradited to Mexico and sentenced to 20 years in maximum security. Except, maximum security meant something different when you had billions of dollars. Chapo ran his empire from inside Puente Grande prison. Gourmet meals delivered, parties hosted, guards bribed at every level, women smuggled in. When authorities finally cracked down, he did what he did best. He vanished. January 2001, Chapo escaped Puente Grande, reportedly hidden in a laundry cart pushed by a prison worker he had been paying for years. The embarrassment for Mexican authorities was total, and Chapo was free to rebuild. For the next 13 years, he expanded his empire to unprecedented scale. 5 continents, dozens of countries, billions in annual revenue. He was the most wanted man in the Western Hemisphere, yet he lived openly in Sinaloa, protected by layers of corruption and local support. February 2014, Mexican Marines finally captured him in Mazatlan, finding him in a condominium with an escape hatch under the bathtub, leading to a tunnel network beneath the city. He had been seconds away from disappearing again. This time, authorities promised, would be different. It wasn't. July 2015, the Altiplano Federal Prison, supposedly the most secure facility in Mexico. Chapo walked to his cell's shower, crouched down, and vanished through a hole in the floor. Waiting below was a mile-long tunnel, professionally constructed with ventilation, lighting, and a modified motorcycle on rails to carry him to freedom. The escape cost an estimated $50 million and took over a year to build, right under the noses of guards who were supposed to be watching him constantly. The humiliation forced Mexican authorities into overdrive. Chapo was recaptured after a shootout in Los Mochis. Months earlier, he had secretly met with Sean Penn and actress Kate Del Castillo for a Rolling Stone interview. The communications were tracked. January 2017, Chapo was extradited to the United States, beyond the reach of his bribery network. The trial that followed was a revelation. Prosecutors detailed an empire that had moved over 200 tons of cocaine into America. Witnesses described bribes paid to governors, generals, and sitting presidents. The evidence painted a portrait of corruption so deep it had essentially captured the Mexican state. Life in prison, no possibility of parole. Today, Joaquin Guzman sits in ADX Florence, the federal supermax in Colorado. 23 hours of solitary confinement daily. Concrete walls, no windows. The man who built tunnels under borders now lives in a cell designed to be inescapable. But here's the uncomfortable truth. The Sinaloa cartel didn't collapse when Chapo fell. His sons, known as Los Chapitos, fight for control. Fentanyl has replaced cocaine as the primary product. The machine he built keeps running. Chapo didn't just build an empire, he built a system. And systems, unlike men, don't stay locked up.